My name is Devin Gordon, and I attend LCBC West Shore. I'm a youth leader for the 7th to 8th grade boys, and I've been at the campus for about 3 years now.
How you doing? Hey, back again?
Me and my wife met in Baltimore, then we moved to New Jersey. Fast forward, 4 years later, we moved to Pennsylvania. All new beginnings, new church, new school for our kid, new job. Then we stumbled across LCBC from one of my wife's associates, and he said, "You should come on through." We came for the first time, and we loved it. Yeah, definitely see our family coming back here. It's comfortable, nice vibe, real welcoming, just a real nice place to be. In 2016, me and my wife decided to get baptized together, decided to turn our life over to Christ. I didn't think it would be that different after getting baptized, but after we came out the water, I knew it was, this is it. When I'm around kids, they just gravitate to me, so I didn't really know if that was my calling or not, but I enjoyed it.
Welcome to Alive! How's everybody doing today? Way to go, come to the church today.
I serve, for one, because the Lord tells me he called for me to serve. And secondly, I just love kids, love action, love sports. It's just carefree, and they're learning, and it's just cool. It's gratifying. It's definitely gratifying.
Grab one. Awesome way.
So volunteering is super important because you always need people to reach out to others to lead them to Christ in different ways. One of our guys actually got baptized and mentioned us in his bio, so that was in itself was just really cool. He pretty much just said how glad he was that he had us and he can confide in us with anything, and just that's what we're here for. So volunteering can definitely make a big church feel smaller. You get to meet each person in their own specified group. Everyone that serves, you know they care. God put all of us in the same realm together for a reason. It definitely changed me a lot. Definitely have my life more, I would say, more open to things that I wasn't really open to before. My name's Devin, and I'm a life changed by Christ.
So cool. So let me tell you what I love about Devin's story. This is what I love about Devin's story. You know, we talk all the time here at our church about the possibility of life change. That God wants to do a work in each one of our lives. That God wants to breathe hope and purpose into our lives. God wants to change us more into who He created us to be. And we believe, we just fundamentally believe here that God can do that in each and every one of us through Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter your story or how far gone you think you are or how hopeless you may feel at times. And so we just celebrate and we tell stories all the time here of the ways in which God is changing lives. And sometimes those stories are really dramatic. But most of the time, the way that God changes our hearts, it's a lot more like Devin's story. It's just small decisions, simple decisions to follow through on the nudges that God places in us, like the decision and the nudge to start serving and leading some middle school guys. And over time, we keep showing up, we keep following through, and then one day we wake up and we realize that our hearts are alive to things that they didn't used to be. And we are seeing the world differently because our faith is being expanded in new ways. And so Devin, let me just say, well done, well done. Way to open up to a nudge that God put on your heart and way to show up for the good of others. And while I'm giving out well dones, well donedies, I'm just gonna say that. While I'm giving out some well donedies, let me just give a well done and recognize, this has already been recognized no matter where location you're at right now, but let me just recognize the work that was done by an army of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of volunteers who showed up across all of our 18 locations across the state to transform our campuses into movie experiences. Our campuses look absolutely amazing, and I wanna say well done to all of you who showed up. Exceptional job. So, here's what that means. What that means is At the Movies officially kicks off next week. You know that. It is going to be a blast. And the reason we do a preview weekend like this one, where we give you a sneak peek into our buildings, is hopefully it gets you excited. Not just about At the Movies, but hopefully it gets you excited about bringing someone with you next week to experience together. I just know, I just believe, I know that there are friends and family, coworkers, neighbors who might not normally come to church with you, but they will come to the At the Movies experience that we've created. It's really one of the easiest opportunities we have all year to invite people to church. So I hope you're making plans to be here next week as we start At the Movies, and I hope you're making plans to bring someone with you. Now today we're wrapping up a series that we've called The Way Back. And we've been talking over the last few weeks about this sense of disconnection that so many of us have felt over this last year. Many of us, we've felt a little bit more cynical at times. We felt a little bit more apathetic at times. We felt a little bit more frustrated at times. And that in turn has led to a growing sense of disconnection from the people closest to us, but way more importantly, a sense of disconnection for many of us from God. And so we've just been asking over the last few weeks, when you feel that disconnection, how can we make our way back to God in a season where it has just been so easy for our faith to grow a little bit cold and a little bit stale? And what we've been unpacking over these last few weeks is that there are 5 specific habits, 5 habits that really in some ways set the stage for us to regain a sense of connection with God. And that ingraining these habits into our lives, if we will ingrain these habits in our lives, it will help us to find our way back. And so today, I just want to talk about the last habit and practice that if we could just embed this practice, this habit into our lives, it would be borderline impossible for us to grow disconnected from God, as we're gonna see in just a few moments. But I'll also just give you a warning kind of out of the gates here. This also may be the most challenging of all the habits that we've talked about. Or maybe at the very least, you are likely to have more objections about this habit as to why this one is not for you than any of the others. Now, I don't want to tell you what the habit is quite yet, but instead, I just want us to look at a story about a particular moment that the disciples were the closest followers of Jesus. I want to talk about a moment and look at a moment where the disciples share with Jesus. It's actually recorded in all 4 of the gospel writings, so in the New Testament. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the fact that it's recorded in all 4 of them shows the importance of this particular event. And I want to look at Matthew's perspective on this. And so if you would turn to the book of Matthew, if you have a Bible with you, that would be great. Matthew's in the New Testament. If you don't have a Bible with you, there's some of the seats around you right now. You can scroll there on your mobile device. Matthew chapter 14. And if you're using one of the seats of the Bibles at the seats, it's page 745. So Matthew chapter 14. I want us to look at this story that might be familiar to a lot of you, actually, regardless of kind of what's your context with church or how much history you have with church. It might be something you've heard, a story you've heard before. And let me just give you a little bit of context before we jump into this particular story. At this moment, right before we jump into this particular moment, Jesus has just learned that one of his closest friends, John, has been killed. He was actually beheaded. It's a horrible story. He was beheaded by a political leader named Herod. And Jesus is grieving, and Jesus is tired, and Jesus wants to do what you want to do when you're grieving and when you're tired, what I want to do, he wants to pull away from everyone. I don't blame him. Look what it says. Look at chapter 14, verse 13. It says, as soon as Jesus heard the news about John, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed, and they followed on foot from many towns. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he rolled his eyes and said, good grief, leave me alone. No, that's not what he did. That's what I would have done. Jesus, he had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. Now, I just want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever just wanted some space? You ever just wanted a little bit of space? If you're a mom, you're nodding your head right now. You ever just want to be left alone? Jesus is in that place, and understandably so, because of the news he's gotten. And the people won't leave him alone. And Jesus responds in such a remarkable way. He steps towards them. But the disciples, they have a very different response. Look at their response. It says, that evening, the disciples came to Jesus and they said, this is a remote place. It's already getting late. Send the crowds what? Away. So they can go get so they can go to the villages and buy some food for themselves. Now, to me, this seems like actually a very reasonable request on the part of the disciples. It's all very pragmatic. It's getting late. There's no Taco Bell around the corner. What are we gonna do here? Let's break this shindig up, Jesus. Let's go home, let's send them away. And of course, none of the disciples want to admit it, but they're a little bit hungry too, and they're a little bit tired as well. And the contrast between the disciples and Jesus could not be more stark. Jesus steps toward the crowd and brings them closer out of compassion. The disciples want to send the crowd away out of practicality. And Jesus uses their response, as he so often does, as this massive teachable moment. Jesus' response to them is so great. Look what he says. But then Jesus said, that's not necessary. Don't send them away. That's not necessary. You feed them. You ever been in a situation with a group where someone says something and everybody else in the group thinks they're joking and they laugh and then you realize like, oh, he's not joking. That's the moment the disciples have right here. Jesus is like, nope, not a joke. You feed them. You feed them. See, guys, Jesus is so empowering. So empowering. You know, to be a follower of Jesus, it is to believe that God is actively working in this world. That God is bringing hope and healing and love and grace and forgiveness into this world. And more remarkable than that, that God wants to use us to bring about that work. You feed them. Jesus is saying, I believe that you are capable of so much more than you think you're capable of. I believe that you are capable of a life that matters and has meaning and has purpose because I'm at work in this world and I can use anyone and everyone who is willing to follow me. So I'm empowering you. You feed them. I wonder sometimes how often we place onto God the burden of meeting needs that we could actually do something about. I know for a fact that I have prayed prayers for people and asked God to do things for them that I was just simply unwilling to do. God, you know they need encouragement. God, I just pray that you encourage them right now. God's like, I want to. You encourage them. Send them a text. Well, that's not really what I meant. God, you know they need some comfort. God, please just comfort them right now. I want to. Go ahead, Jace. You comfort them. Pop over, drop them off a meal. God, I just pray that you provide for them. I want to. You provide for them. Give them some money. Look, for some of you, the reason why Christianity actually rings a little bit hollow, I mean, like, you're here today, but the only reason you're here is because some cute girl invited you. So you're here, you don't even know if you believe all this stuff. You're not sure what you believe about Jesus, the Bible, and all that. And some of you, the reason is because a long time ago, you had some experiences with Christians, and the whole thing rings a little bit hollow for you because your experience with Christians has been one where it was just a bunch of people who were willing to ask God to do a bunch of things in this world that they weren't willing to do themselves. And I understand how that would turn you off, but I also know that it is just so easy. It's so easy to just ask God to do something in this world without considering my role in it because, to be completely honest, we don't feel capable. We have our own insecurities and fears and our own hangups, and 1,000 excuses rush into our heart and our mind as to why there's no way in the world we could feed these people right now. And that's where the disciples find themselves. Because look what they said next. But Jesus, but we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. That's all we got. Now, if I had been there that day, I probably would have been carrying around something like this. Because this is what we take all the time. You know, we take a little thing like this to the beach, and anytime we go on a picnic and all that kind of stuff, right? This little cooler thing. This little lunch box. And the disciples, this is what they do. They take a quick peek inside the box and they go, we're in trouble. Jesus, we're grateful that you want to empower us. That's nice. And that you're nudging us to join you in the work that you want to do right now, but we don't have enough. We do not have enough. Guys, you know, we all have our own versions of why we back down from the nudges that God puts on our hearts. We all have our I don't have enough stories. I don't have enough margin in my schedule right now, God. I feel that nudge, but I just don't have enough margin in my schedule. Maybe at some point. I feel that nudge, God, but I don't really know them well enough. So it might be weird if I invited them to church. I know you're kind of nudging me too, but I don't really know them. It's not enough. I don't really have enough resources to help with that right now. And just like the disciples, we love looking in our box and quickly focus on all that we don't have. It's not enough, Jesus. See? What we have is not enough. And by the way, Jesus knew. So why in the world would he even put this invitation out there to them? Why would he tell them, you feed them? He knows that they don't have enough. You know what's interesting? In John's recording of this event, he actually lets us in on a little insight about Jesus' intention that it wasn't known at the time. He found out later. And he said that Jesus asked them to feed the crowd to, quote, test them. To test them. What was Jesus testing? You know what he was testing? Jesus was testing whether or not they would trust him to do something great with what little they had to bring. And what Jesus says next, it is the invitation that if we do what Jesus says next, it will unlock a connection with God. You want to find your way back to God? What Jesus says next, it is the peace, man, that unlocks that connection in a powerful way. It's so simple. Look what he says. Bring them here. Just bring them here. Bring them here. What little you have, just bring it to me. Yeah, but it's not a lot, Jesus. It's all right. Just bring me what little think you have. It's just 5 pieces of bread and 2. It's all right. Just bring it here. And watch what I can do with it. Guys, you know, we all have a box. We all got a lunchbox. You've got one. I've got one. We've all got one. We all have some loaves and some fish. It's resources, our times, our energy, experiences, it's our skills. And some of us got a lot of loaves and a lot of fish. And some of us have a little amount of loaves and a little amount of fish. The size of the loaves and the fish and the amount doesn't matter. What Jesus is simply asking is, however many loaves and fish you have, would you bring it to me? Because whatever you have, however lacking you may feel it is more than enough, Jesus says, in my hands. And when you open up your hands and you let me do something with what you have, I can multiply it and I can use it in ways you could never imagine. Guys, this is the last habit that we want to talk about. The last habit I just want us to grasp for any of us who are serious about finding our way back to God. In those seasons that it feels like we've grown a little bit disconnected, it's this. It's the habit of open-handedness. It's the habit of waking up each and every day with a posture of open hands and saying, God, the loaves and the fish that you've given me today, all that you've given me in my box, it's yours. It's yours. And I trust that whatever I bring to you, you are able to do something greater with it than could ever be done with me just clinging to it. So let's get even more practical for just a second. You know, the 2 most valuable resources that we all have in our boxes at varying degrees are time and money. We all have that in some way, shape, or form, right? And the people that you know in your life that you would consider role models for the kind of faith that you want to develop in your life. You know those people that you look at them and you're just like, man, how does their faith stay so strong? How do they withstand the storms? That their faith is just like an anchor in their life. How do they do that? You want me to tell you a secret? One of the things that those kinds of people that you want to role model your faith off of, they are constantly evaluating both time and money through the lens of how open-handed they are being with both those things. Let's talk about time for a second. You know, there's 2 sort of litmus tests that you can run in your life to determine how open-handed you're being with your time. The first is just this. Just ask yourself, how open are you to interruptions in your schedule? How open are you to interruptions in your schedule? By the way, isn't this exactly what happened to Jesus? He did this right in front of the disciples when he was interrupted by the crowds that day. That wasn't on his agenda. How tightly do you cling to your previously scheduled life? Or do you create margin to be interrupted if needed? Open hands with your time. The second question, or the second litmus test to determine how open-handed you'll be with it, your time is just take a look at the way you're spending your time and notice how often you're spending time with people who can offer you nothing in return. Because let's just admit it, it's easy to give time to people who can give us some sort of return on that investment of time, but that doesn't mean you're being open-handed with your time. That might mean you're just being calculated. And guys, this is why we here at LCBC, this is why we unashamedly talk and invite you and encourage you to serve in one of our ministry environments. This is why we share stories like Devin's from just a few moments ago. It's not because we need more bodies. It's because God is up to work in this world. And we have seen what happens when we take the time that is in our box and we simply just kind of hold it out and say, Jesus, it's just an hour. It's just an hour with some middle school guys, but use it. It's just a half hour opening doors, but Jesus, in your hands, it's more than that, use it. It's just a couple of nights out of the month. It may not seem like a lot, but in your hands, it's better, so just use it. Not only do we have time in our box, every one of us, but we also have money. And again, some of us, we got a few loaves, and we wish we had more bread. But some of us, we got a lot of loaves. The point isn't the amount. The point is how open-handed we'll be with what we have. Guys, when it comes to money, I don't know what it is, but guys, being open-handed with our money is a fast track to experiencing a deeper connection with God. And I think it's actually because Jesus himself said that there is nothing that competes for our hearts like money. In fact, Matthew records at one point during the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus saying that you cannot serve, it's impossible, will never happen. You cannot serve both God and we think he might say sin, not what he says. You can't serve both God and the devil. Nope, not what he says. You can't serve both God and idols. Nope, not what he says. He says you cannot serve both God and money. And money's not bad, and money certainly isn't evil, but when we start to close our hands around our money in our box, it is a matter of time before we lose a sense of connection with God. Again, it's why we here at our church, we just unashamedly talk about percentage giving. We talk about it all the time. In particular, the principle of tithing and the practice of tithing. Bringing our first 10% and giving it back to God. It's a habit that breaks the power of money from ruling us because that practice alone starts the process of opening up our hands. And on the other side of developing a trust and a connection with God. A friend of mine one time, he told me, I've never forgotten this, I love this. He said, Jace, man, I believed in Jesus for a long, long time. For years I'd believed in Jesus. But when I finally opened up my hands and I started to tithe, that was the first time I trusted Jesus. And I love that my friend, he used that word trust. Because ultimately, that is what opening our hands up will require. Trust. And the disciples on that day, all those years ago, man, they had a decision to make related to trust. Because look what it says next. Jesus said, bring them here. And then he told the people to sit down on the grass. And Jesus took the 5 loaves. We'll come back to that in a second. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He looked up towards heaven and he blessed them. And then breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples who distributed it to the people. Now, I just want you to put yourself in the disciples' shoes for a second. Try to get there, right? Because this is a moment of vulnerability for the disciples. Just think about this. You're tired and you are hungry, and you've just scrounged up the most food you can find, and you're about to hand it over. And then not only that, that's a vulnerable feeling, by the way. Not only that, and then he's asking you to take that small amount that you just handed over to him, and he's gonna break it, and then he's gonna say, now you go distribute it. Meaning, you don't know if you're gonna get 4 people in and run out and look like an idiot. I want you to hear this. Risk and insecurity are natural byproducts of open-handedness, always. Risk and insecurity are natural byproducts of a life committed to the habit of open-handedness. In other words, anytime we decide to open up our hands and follow through on a nudge that God is giving us, there are 2 fundamental questions that inevitably will make their way into our hearts and our minds that will try to convince us not to open up our hands. The first one is this: will I be taken care of? God, if I do this, am I gonna be taken care of? The second is, am I gonna look stupid? I feel you nudging me. I feel you nudging me to do something with this, but God, are you going to take care of me if I do? And am I going to look like a fool? And listen, guys, these questions are particularly pressing in seasons of uncertainty. Why? Because when life around us starts to feel uncertain, fear tends to creep in. And when fear sets in, you know what the tendency is to do with what's in our box. Protect it. Guard it. Preserve it at all cost. Whatever I have in my box, it's for me. And right now is not the time to be open-handed with it. Right now, because of the uncertainty around me, the fear that's kind of in the air right now is the time to clamp down on it. Guys, I think we can all agree that this last season has brought up a ton of fear and uncertainty over this last year. And the natural response for many of us has been to clamp down and close our hands out of fear and insecurity. And we've lost a connection with God as a result. And I get it. It's personal for me. I don't know about you, but I've found myself in this last year growing a lot more insulated. I found myself this last year growing a lot more protective over the things in my box, my loaves and my fish. Over this last year and a half, man, I've just felt my fists clenching up. And in particular, just being completely frank with you, kind of out there, particularly around money. You know, tithing has just always been a practice for me and Jenny. So we started that the day first, when we were first married, that was just a non-negotiable thing for us. If you're considering getting married or if you're newly married, I cannot strongly encourage you enough. Just make that a non-negotiable thing. We're going to give back to God our first 10% because it's a lot easier to start that way than trying to course correct, although that's possible as well. But anyways, that was just a decision we made. We were going to start there. And so for us, Jenny and I, our first 10%, that's a given. Giving it back to the church, giving it back to God. We start there. That's our floor. It's not our ceiling. That's our floor. That's where we start. But we also want to be open-handed then for other nudges to give above and beyond that. And over the last year, there's been a few times that I have sensed God nudging me to give above and beyond of some needs that came up. And all the buts started flooding my mind and my heart. But, hold up, God, but. With COVID, we don't know what the economy's going to do. I better hold on to this. But this is a time to preserve and protect. You know that, God, right? But wisdom would be right now to just see how this all plays out, and then let's talk about giving. And I found myself holding on to what's in my box a lot tighter until recently. Because not long ago, there was a situation that Jenny and I were made aware of. There was a family that we had known for years that was devastated by the sudden loss of one of the family members. And one day I was praying for the family. God, comfort them. God, provide for them. Praying for the family, praying for the children left behind. And I knew Jesus was nudging in that moment. Jason, I want to support them. I want to provide for them like you're asking. You want to partner with me? You want to open up your hands? So I gave in, reluctantly, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And here's how much I think we should give. Until about 2 seconds later, when I felt God real clearly saying, guys, when I talk about God speaking and nudging, it's not a voice you hear. It's if you want to call it conscious, if you want to call it, when you're seeking God, Jesus said, seek and you will find. He's not hiding from us. When we're authentically seeking Jesus, he'll speak into our life. That's why I call it more of a nudge. And I just felt him nudge me again. I said, God, here's what we'll give. And I just felt him say, Jason, proud of your effort. Good effort. But Jason, 10 times that. And I said, crud. Do I have to go tell Jenny that amount? And for any of you newer husbands out there who may still be a little bit boneheaded, the question, or the answer to the question, do I need to go tell my wife, is always yes. And I went to Jenny, she was sitting out on the deck, and Jenny is so generous, man. She's so gracious. And she didn't hesitate, and she just said, absolutely. Why wouldn't we? And guys, it felt a little bit risky. And it felt a little bit vulnerable. But when I finally hit send on that money and my hands finally opened up, I don't know how to describe it other than my heart, which had been getting smaller over this last year, smaller over this last season, it started to open back up again to God. Here's what I can tell you. The moments in my life that I have seen God work most powerfully, they are almost always on the other side of a decision to just open up my hands. Sometimes in big ways, but honestly, most of the time in really small day in, day out decisions to just follow through on a nudge. And here's what I know about you. You wanna know what I know about you? At some point, you benefited from a decision that someone made to open up their hands. And you would never know it. Maybe you don't know you benefited from it. You would never know it because you didn't see the wrestle they went through to open up. All you knew was that they invited you to church and your life has been different ever since. That's all you knew. All you knew is they sent you a note at exactly the right time that encouraged you. All you knew is that they prayed with you and you didn't even know you needed prayer, but man, when they prayed with you, it's like your heart came alive to God in that moment. All you knew is they just gave their time to help you when you needed it. But what you didn't know is their heart was beating out of their chest because they were scared and it felt risky and they felt vulnerable and they wrestled with all the excuses in the world that almost kept them from following through. But it didn't. And they ended up following through on that nudge. And aren't you grateful? And don't you want to be that for someone else? Even if you never know the effect it has on them. Wouldn't that be worth fighting through the risk and insecurities that we feel? And the disciples made that choice. They opened their hands and they brought what little they had to Jesus so he could do something greater. And look what happened. It says they all ate as much as they wanted. And afterwards, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. About 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. They got to be a part of something remarkable that day. They had a story to tell their children and their grandchildren. Why? Because they made a decision to open up their hands and just bring what they had to Jesus. They were open-handed. They said, Jesus, this is all I have. It's just a few fish. It's just a few loaves. It's all I have in my box. But in your hands, it's more than that. In your hands, it's greater. It's just a note of encouragement. It's just a text encouraging them, but in your hands, it's greater. So I'm gonna follow through on that nudge. It's just a meal we're dropping off to this family. It's just some money. It's just an invitation to church. It's just an hour out of time on my weekend, but in your hands, it can be multiplied, Jesus, into something so much greater. So here it is. So here's the two questions that we should probably reflect on to kind of wrap our time. What's in my box? And are my hands open with it? It's a question you ought to ask. It's a question I ought to ask. What's in my box? And are my hands open with it? Or are they tightened up a little bit right now? And Jesus is saying, I'm not asking you to change the world. That's my job. Jesus said, I can do that. I'm just asking you that whatever's in your box, no matter how small or how big, would you be willing to open up your hands with it? And bring it to me when I nudge you to partner with me in the work that I'm doing in the world. And guys, listen, if you want a surefire way to stay close to God and to reconnect with God, I'm not sure there is anything that will fast track that to happen more than this habit of living with open hands. You know why? Because when you do this, it forces trust. And when you step out in trust, you will discover that you have a heavenly Father who is trustworthy. And your faith will be expanded in monumental ways. The band is going to just sing over us to close out this series today. And I just want us to keep these two questions at the forefront of our thoughts as the band sings over us. What's in my box? And are my hands open with it? And maybe as you listen today, maybe for some of you, you just need a physical reminder, like your physical posture matters. Maybe you just need to do this. As you listen to these words, you just, hands open. As a way of saying, God, I want to be open-handed with everything you've given me. When I sense your nudge, I'm going to do it. Because some of you, you know something very specific right now. You've been feeling a nudge to give some time, to jump in and start serving, to begin to give. You've felt a nudge to reach out to someone in particular or specifically, but you've buried it. You've held on to it. I don't have the margin, I don't have the time, maybe when things settle down a little bit more. But today, I just think Jesus is kind of knocking down all of our excuses and just saying, why would you wait? Why would you wait to experience the kind of blessing that comes from opening up your hands with what you've been given and allowing me to do something so much greater with it? So what's in your box? And would you open up your hands with it to see what he can do when it's placed in his hands?
Narrow as the road may seem, I'll follow where your spirit leads. Broken as my life may be, I will give you every piece. I hear you call, I am available. I say, yes, Lord, I am available. Here I am with open hands, counting on your grace again. Less of me and more of you. I want to see your spirit move. I hear you call, I am available. I say, yes, Lord, I am available. I hear you a sacrifice. Use me how you want to, God. Have your throne within my heart. I hear, and I hear you call. I am available. I say, yes, Lord. I am available. I'm available to you. Come and move.
For the one who gave me life, nothing is a sacrifice. Guys, Jesus is still working in our world. And the remarkable thing is that Jesus is still inviting us to participate in that work. And he's not asking you to do more or to be more than you already are. He's just asking you to bring what you have to him and to trust him to do something greater with it, to live open-handed each day, to just say, here I am, I'm available. Take my small acts and do something great with it. And if you do that, I'm telling you, man, you will find a connection with God that can only be experienced by practicing the habit of open-handedness, because on the other side, we discover that he is trustworthy in every way. Well, today, if you'd like to talk or to pray with someone about anything, we would love to have that opportunity to pray with you. And so if you're in one of our LCBC locations, there are people down in the front left corner of each of our auditoriums. And when we're finished, just come on down. We'd love to have the privilege to pray with you. And if you're watching online right now, the chat, it'll stay open for a few minutes. And again, we would love to have, our host would love to have the opportunity to pray with you as well. Listen, next week, it's going to be a great one. It is going to be an absolute blast as we kick off at the movies. We are ready. The stage is set. The only thing left to do at this point is just to invite some people and for us to roll out the red carpet for every single person who walks through our doors. It's going to be a great one. We can't wait. Until then, LCBC this week, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week for At the Movies.